So before I call up all the panelists, I just want to go through a few things. Obviously, this is a discussion, which means that we are going to be having debates about certain topics, and opinions might not be the same. So I think we should just all respect the fact that we all have different opinions, and that we can respect them and allow them, but we can also challenge them. So if you don't agree with them, let's find constructive ways to critique their opinions. So I think that's one thing we should just bear in mind. Number two, we are going to have a question and answer session. So if you have any questions during the discussion, please hold it up until we reach the question and answer session. And yeah, let's introduce the panelists. So I'm going to start with Ms. Ella Mogolane. She is the CEO of SACE, also known as the South African Council for Educators. So Ms. Ella, can you please come up on stage? Second will be Asif Bubulia. He is the former MSA chairperson. He's also our IT technician. So Asif, can you please come up on stage? We have Dr. Sarah Godsall. She is a member of the Wits School of Education Transformation Committee. Professor Felix Maringa was supposed to be here, but unfortunately he couldn't make it. In place of Professor Maringa, we have Professor Elizabeth Mabunga. She is a professor in the Department of Science Education. We have Question Malaflela. He is a fourth-year education student. Very important person because next year he's going to be a teacher. Let's give him a round of a hand. And then last but not least, we have the president of the Radical Teachers Institute Foundation, Mr. Philip Flatwayo. And because I love myself, I am also going to take a seat. Right, so thank you all for being here. I really appreciate it. The team appreciates it. Let's jump right into it. So, you know that the theme is oppression and liberation in education. I want each and every panelist to please provide a conceptual view of oppression, and I don't have mics for you guys. So, just a conceptual view of oppression or liberation and how it currently shapes the education system. And I think I will start on the far left. So, there's another mic. Mr. Flatwayo, I think you can open for us.
Good evening. Yeah, let me just say that we appreciate you coming here as a foundation and supporting the work that the student division is doing here at Wits. And speaking on the topic, I think we need to explore the issues around oppression itself, since I'm the one who's the first one to speak. So I think I'll be doing justice to actually do that. So when I actually researched and looked at the topic of oppression, I came across some literature, which is written by Ruth, explaining the concept of oppression. And she speaks about 4 circles of oppression. The first one being the physical, the second one being the psychological, the third one being the economic, and the last one being the internalization of oppression. Now, because I speak on behalf of teachers, I'm going to draw all these four concepts or elements of what we call oppression to the context of the teaching profession. In terms of the teaching profession, we understand that the conditions of work, in as far as what teachers are subjected to on a daily basis, is not in a good condition. And I think we can all agree that they are subjected to a situation where their labor is exploited to some degree, and the fact that their efforts in whatever work that they're doing is unappreciated. So when you look at the first element of oppression, which is physical, you then get to understand that there are systems in place that govern teachers' work. And in governing teachers' work, you find yourself in a situation where when you don't fulfill certain duties, there are repercussions for those particular actions, such as being charged for failing to fulfill certain roles as a teacher. And those particular elements or tools can be used to oppress, and they can be used to actually subjugate a teacher as an individual. The second level, which is psychological, has to do with what they sort of stipulate to be values and what makes up a teacher. So they will tell you a teacher is this type of a person, and you need to subscribe to that particular identity or image. And this can be done by various stakeholders. They can be done by various role players. It could be the government, it could be the unions, it could be the school community itself. But they sort of define what a teacher is and how you should act as a teacher, what you should be doing as a teacher, what you should be saying. The third one, which is a struggle that has been long happening, is the economic one, where as a teacher you are oppressed in as far as what constitutes the resources that you need to live as a human being, and that has to do is pertaining to the salary that you receive as a teacher. And that can be used as a tool as well to, bring it down and actually confine you within a particular box that they want you to be in. And then the last one is internalization. So the fourth stage is whereby as a teacher you subscribe to these oppression tools and you sort of give in and say that I can't do anything beyond whatever circumstances are defining. So you give up to a degree to say that, it's done. If this is the conditions that I'm subjected to, I can work within these conditions and sort of adjust myself to do my work. Now in 2013, a show that we know, which is popular here in South Africa, I'm sure you're going to stop me when I'm out of time. In 2013, a show called The Big Debate asked a crucial question, asked, can teachers fix the education system? And when I look at that particular question, I grappled with it and I actually realized that it depends who asks the question. If it's teachers themselves who are asking, can we fix the education system, it's another issue. And if it's the government who's asking the question, or if it's another teacher organization who's asking the question, can teachers fix the education system, it's another issue. So I am saying that these four circles of oppression are the ones that are defining the conditions that teachers find themselves in.
Thank you so much, Philip. I think we'll come back to that because I think that's a very good question, and we will definitely come back to that. Question?
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Tantamount to what he said, I'll just be brief because it's covered so much. There's a code in sociology that says you cannot understand an individual without understanding where an individual comes from. So I'd like to take that and replace an individual with concept. You cannot understand the concept until you understand where concept comes from. Oppression is the result of a system that we lived in, which was apartheid system. Apartheid system left a very deep, uneven, and unequal education system. Therefore, in my own definition, I say oppression is an education system that only favors the minority and discriminates against the majority.
Very short and sweet, but yet powerful. We're going to get back to you on that as well. Professor Mabuka?
Hi, afternoon everyone. I think in models. My mind works in models. So if I were to define what oppression is, I feel it is this entity that is very tacit. It comes through in various forms. In some cases, it's very clear, explicit, and you can work and track its source, where it's coming from. And in some cases, I think it's very obscure. And I think this is the dangerous part, and I'd like to elaborate on this at some point. It is there, but you don't actually see it, right? And its source is actually difficult because sometimes the source is you yourself, all right? So I also think that oppression is a tool, and it is a tool that sometimes is used by someone externally to another person, right? And sometimes it's a tool that you yourself, you can also use unaware, and this is the aspect that I think we need to also talk to. And since we're in education, these factors are playing so much in different ways. It's systematic, everyone can see it, is obviously there, we can define it, we can quantify its effect, we can even work against it. And sometimes the obscure that is in the individual, it's still holding us back because it's not the defined element, it's not the obvious, and it's not the well-appointable and, tracked easily. So I would like to take into the discussion, and I'll expand more.
Would you like to expand on it now?
All right. So the explicit one, the obvious systematic oppression is the one that we know, we've documented about it, it's been written about it. We know long, long time ago, we come from a system that never liked certain people. The way it planned with a clear intention of inferior education, particularly in science education. It had restrictive ways of doing things. The science that we learned was given and produced and presented in such abstract way that not only did we have to deal with the language of learning it, but also it was abstract. It was just not related to us. If you can imagine trying to learn what a thermometer is, and a thermometer is something that rises when it's hot and it's something that drops when it's cold. I mean, you imagine whether it's this thing, something that stands up or goes down, So it's funny now, but with the years of being exposed to the system, I'm now able to reflect back. So the systematic and explicit oppression is this that we can define. And is this that we have fought so much against? And it's well documented. It's been used as a tool in many circumstances, and it has effect on the economy. I don't want to go into the history. I'm assuming certain level of knowledge of the system. Today we are here because, in a sense, it's part of the many years of effort to try and lift up that oppression that was systematic, all right? That could be visible, that could be fought. But I am observing another kind of oppression. And this kind of oppression, I'm not sure whether it's well documented, it's purely my observations and reflections. It does not, and these reflections are not standing under the views of the school, neither the head of school, are my personal views. I think as the oppressed in education, we have actually also learned how to oppress ourselves, right? In many different ways. And these ways, the danger of these ways is that these ways are very obscure, they're not explicit. We have become very comfortable with a system where I, as a student, I'm happy to sit and receive, and I actually enter a classroom with expectation of being given, of being taught, of being lectured to, of being shown and what I need to read. And my scope of exploration of that concept is really limited to the mark, and is really limited to the classroom discussion, and it's really, it's a box. If I walk within my boxes, I'm okay.
Professor Babungwat?
I'm wrapping up.
Okay. No, because I was going to let us explore that in a bit more detail later on, once you get everyone's views.
All right.
So I think we'll just keep it there for now.
Okay.
Asim?
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. In the name of Allah, the most gracious, the most merciful. Before I speak in any sort of public engagement or public discussion, I have a tendency to recite a dua or a prayer from the Quran. This is a prayer that was recited by Moses when he confronted Pharaoh about the oppression that he was meting out against the Bani Israel, or the children of Israel. In Arabic it goes, رَبِّ اشْرَحْ لِي صَدْرِي وَيَسِّرْ لِي أَمْرِي وَاحْلُلْ عُقْدَةً مِنْ لِسَانِي يَفْقَهُوا قَوْلِي. Which means, O my Lord, expand for me my chest, make easy for me my task, and untie the knot from my tongue, so that they may understand my speech. I'd like to begin by expressing my gratitude to the Almighty, Pulu, Modimo, Allah, for blessing us with the opportunity to be here this afternoon. I'd like to thank the RTI team, of which I happen to be a part, and the Wits School of Education for all of the behind-the-scenes work that goes into making sure that these things happen. And most importantly, I'd like to thank you, all of you, for being here this afternoon. We say that I exist because others allow me to exist, right? We couldn't have this sort of conversation unless there was an audience and unless you were willing to engage with us in this conversation. So, from the bottom of my heart, I thank you for being here. The Prophet Muhammad, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, or peace be upon him, is reported to have said that actions are by their intentions, and every person will get what they had intended. Which compels us to think about our intentions for being here this afternoon, but also more generally, we need to think about why is it that we are teachers? Why are we studying education? Why do we do the liberation work that's needed on a day-to-day basis? And the most that I can do is to reflect personally, right? So that I can share my own intentions and my own reasons for doing what I do. When I was in first year, I read this book called Pedagogy of the Oppressed by Paulo Freire. Considering the theme of our discussion today, I highly recommend it. And in it, he goes into talking about the nature of oppression, trying to understand what is meant by oppression. And he defines it as a process of dehumanization, right? So when some aspect of your humanity is being stripped away from you for whatever reason, right? So we understand racism to be an oppressive system because it strips black people of their dignity, of their agency, of their power, of their voice, on the basis of their blackness. We understand sexism to be an oppressive system because it robs women of their dignity, of their voice, of their agency on the basis of their gender. Right? So, he makes an interesting point, right? So Paulo Freire talks about how oppression doesn't just affect the person being oppressed. It also affects and it also dehumanizes the person doing the oppressing. Right? If we think about how racism as an oppressive system also affects white people, they may or may not realize it. But they generally don't, they lose the ability to empathize with people because they don't see black people as full human beings. Right? This is a product of the system of racism and white supremacy. But after going into those definitions of what oppression means and trying to unpack the dynamics between the oppressor and the oppressed, Paulo Freire makes a point about how teaching in itself, and the way that we've been doing it, is an oppressive profession. And he illustrates this by pointing out that what we've adopted is what's known as the banking concept of education, where we assume that our students don't have the capacity to develop knowledge for themselves, and we don't take their interpretation of their contexts into consideration. So, to answer the question, I think this is where I'm getting to. Part of the reason as to why I want to invest myself in liberation work is because I realize that as long as I continue to exist in a society in which people are being robbed of their humanity, and as long as I continue to seemingly benefit from that existence, my own humanity is at stake. And so that's the reason that we do the liberation work, right? It's because we are fighting to hold on to our dignity, to hold on to our humanity, and to fight for the things that we value and the things that we love about ourselves and about our society.
All right, thank you, Asif. Ms. Bukhadane.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon, prospective educators.
Afternoon.
I'm speaking on behalf of the profession, because Stacey is a custodian of the teaching profession. One of the things really that I've personally observed with regard to issues around oppression is that there are 3 areas, like you've identified the 4 areas with regard to psychological, economical, and all that. But I think I want to add what Professor Magunda has already indicated, issues of personal. There's issues around personal oppression, but also within the teaching profession you will notice collective oppression and also relational. And I think you've observed what's going on in Gauteng in particular. There are serious issues amongst Africans themselves. You have a war of us as Africans oppressing each other. There's a strong fight amongst colors and your black Africans. And that thing is coming up thick and fast. You thought racism was racism in a typical sense with regards to issues of white and black and all that, but amongst ourselves as Africans it's coming back. And if we are not doing something hard about it and serious about it, we're going to find ourselves wanting, because in schools currently, we just don't want African teachers in our own Indian, colored and white schools. We believe in other races, in other colors except ourselves. And to a certain extent, it comes back to the issues of personal oppression, it comes back to the issues of relational oppression, and also, as a collective, what are we doing around that? But also, there's a serious issue amongst ourselves not believing in our own schools, in our own teaching. It's continuing, and people are saying, why would I believe in you teaching my kid when you can't believe in your own school and your own self as a teacher? You're taking your children out of the townships, you're taking your children out of your own schools, and that is impacting on working conditions, it's impacting on issues of redeployment because we're not having numbers in our own areas, in our own schools. But there's also issues of language, which again, we are oppressing ourselves. We are feeling proud to say, my own daughter, whose name is Karabo, can't speak Spedi, for example. I mean, how much can we oppress ourselves to say it only makes sense, the person can only be measured in terms of his or her own intellectual capacity if she's speaking English in a particular foreign accent. Those are real typical issues that we are experiencing in our own education system, and unless we confront them and begin to liberate ourselves, we'll continue to have personal oppression that is continuing like never before, and we are not even beginning to touch an inch on that. We are not beginning to address those issues. We're also beginning to see issues of, and I would say it's oppression because it's dehumanizing, like you indicated, the extent at which violence is rife in our own schools. It's violence in different ways. We're seeing physical assault between its various components, between teachers, learners, teachers, parents, learners, teachers amongst themselves. It's scary. And to what an extent can we even begin to talk issues of human rights, issues of dignity, if amongst ourselves we don't respect each other within the schooling environment, within the education system. But there's even more violation in terms of our own dignity, our own human rights, because the gender-based violence is escalating. The extent at which we can't distinguish between small children of 7 years and above, and not understanding ourselves as professionals to say we can't be really dehumanizing kids, children, to that extent, and having serious sexual relations issues that are really violating them and oppressing them, and hence I'm saying it's a relational, it's physical, it's all those, and also issues of verbal abuse that lead to us sometimes having serious violence in our own schools.
Thank you, Ms. Dr. Bassimo?
Thank you. Thank you for the invitation. Thank you, everybody, for being here. I've been a fan of the Radical Teachers Institute on Facebook for a while, so it's nice to interact with you guys. I think the brief was conceptual definition of oppression or liberation, right? Okay, so the benefit of being on the end of a panel is that a lot of stuff has already been covered about oppression. So I think I'm going to mainly speak about liberation, just to touch on a conceptual view of oppression quickly. I think the concept, Professor Crenshaw's concept of intersectionality is important. So bringing together all of the different physical, psychological, economic, social, political, internal, relational aspects, but understanding ourselves as embodied beings in our positionality and the ways the different vectors of oppression affect us. So affect Black women more, so affect Black queer women more, and understanding our world in those terms I think is important. But to speak about liberation, I think it's strange for me as a historian to want to focus more on where we're going and where we've been and where we are, which is oppression. I mean, we live in capitalism, we live in white supremacy, we live in a heteropatriarchy, we live under neoliberalism, which I think is also a form of oppression, which we could maybe expand on later. But Nina Simone has a lovely definition of freedom, which she just defines as no fear, not feeling fear. So when I think about liberation, I think about that as a project of making a society where nobody feels fear. And that includes not being fearful of not having food, not being fearful of not having a place to live, not being fearful of not being able to provide for your children or your family, not being fearful of being killed by your partner. And I think when we think about this in terms of education, we need to think about both what we're teaching and how we're teaching. And so I like Bell Hooks's idea of education as a practice of freedom, and engaged pedagogy, and maybe you can expand on that later. But in terms of what knowledge we have, you know, here's my historian coming in. We're building on such a long history of colonial and then apartheid education systems that actively suppressed critical thinking and emotion and knowledges that were centered in Africa, knowledges that were not centered around whiteness. And so I want to just read a poem by Koleka Mutuma from her book Collective Amnesia. It's a very short poem. And I am going to censor, there's one swear word that I'm going to censor. But it's called Teachings, and this is her response to an oppressive education system. Transparency, noun. A weapon used to exorcise a lineage of silence. Talk, noun. A medicine used to heal years of silence. Writing, noun. A doctrine used to deliver one from all the ills of silencing. Share, noun. A tool used to dismantle a learnt behavior of suffering alone in silence. Publishing, verb. A middle finger to the erasure and silencing of women like me. Archiving, verb. An FU to the canon. These are also not the school's views, these are my views personally.
Thank you so much. Thank you for your conceptual views, because I think now we've all gained a sense of what oppression is and in which forms oppression can occur, either within our own lives, within our schooling context, within even relating with each other. There's a form of oppression. What I want to start with, and I think it's one of the biggest things in our profession, and one of the panelists spoke about it a bit, was the violence. Violence in schools is actually hindering education or teaching and learning to take place. So I want to start off from there. And I want to ask a very simple question. It might sound simple, but I think it's a very deep-rooted question. Are teachers and or learners safe in the classroom? It's a very simple question, but we actually need to sit and think about it. I mean, we can go to a classroom and we can sit there for 8 hours learning, but is that really a safe space? I'm going to open up the question to anyone, so any panelists can start, and then we'll move on like that. I'd like also to request to just keep your responses to at least 2 minutes, so that we can grant everyone a chance to answer, and then we can move on to other questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I would say yes and no. It depends on certain contextual factors, where you are, where you're teaching and where you're learning. But the majority of our schools, to be honest, are not safe at all. And therefore our teachers, our learners are exposed to those conditions. And I think you've seen in terms of the media headlines every day, teachers are exposed, and I'll speak more about teachers because my jurisdiction is on teachers. Are exposed to these violent situations. Parents just walk into the schools and can hit a teacher anytime, depending on whatever issue that the learners are bringing back at home. And we've seen one teacher that has been hit by a parent with an umbrella and ended up in a hospital, not long. But similarly, the learners are not safe because of certain things that are happening in communities and within the vicinity of schools are coming into the schools, and hence we say schools are microcosm of the society. And unless we deal with schools, with communities, we deal with our own parents, we deal with various government institutions collaboratively, we're not going to be in a position to win this battle. So that's my take as a start.
I'll give Philip and then ask if you'll be next.
Sure. In terms of violence in schools, I think the issue of safety has always been compromised for years. And the reason why I'm saying, and thank God now we can, engage without being conceptual and stuff. But what I'm saying is the violence has always been there. But the exposure of violence has changed since time because of the emergence of technology and the fact that we can take videos now. But I think safety in schools has always been compromised. Now my concern is, because I also speak on the side of teachers, even though we are not a professional field for that matter, is the fact that when it comes to policies that govern what happens within the school itself, what regulates the conduct of teachers and what regulates the conduct of learners, there's a big discrepancy between the two. I'm glad we have the presentation of SACE, which is regulating teachers. But then we realize that policies that are in place and documents that are guiding whatever is happening in schools are always pro-learners. So you never get documents that specify in terms of the teacher's presence within the school, in as far as what are you saying with their safety? What are you saying with how their work is compromised? And by the way, when it's compromised, the government comes back and says, you must be held accountable regardless of the conditions that you work in. So I think, like I'm saying, the safety of schools has been compromised for years. It's just that now, the reason why we are all jumping is because it's in the fall. It has been put in our face in terms of whatever gadgets that we're using to record it. But I think the issue here, the underlying issue, is on the policies. And if you have a body that regulates teachers in terms of their professional conduct, you should have a body that regulates learners in terms of their conduct in school.
So my take on this is, when we talk about violence, it's important for us to bear in mind that violence takes on many different forms, right? So we can talk about physical abuse in the sense of, and we have seen that, you're going to be showing clips, but, of the violence that was alluded to, of, students hitting other students and teachers hitting students, and, it goes so many different ways. But we must never lose sight of institutionalized violence, right? We must never lose sight of the fact that, when you have kids drowning in pit latrines at their schools, right? And we've had multiple kids drowning under those circumstances. That is a form of state-sanctioned violence, right? When we have, last week I facilitated the dialogue on the same theme at the campus. Somebody mentioned that, their teachers gave them demerits for speaking the languages that they spoke, right? If you speak an indigenous language, you speak an African language in a class, why does that merit, a demerit? Somebody else spoke about how they had their grades measured to see whether or not it conformed with the school code of conduct. Is that not a form of violence as well? Where people are being robbed of their dignity, they're being robbed of their humanity on a deep psychological level, right? On the basis of the length of their hair, the texture of their hair. So, we can address the physical forms of violence, but simultaneously we must also be consciously thinking about how do we undo the multiple levels of violence that exist at almost every level of the education sector. And again, coming from my spiritual tradition as a Muslim, something that I keep on having to come back to for myself is to think about the violence that I perpetuate upon myself and to think about the condition of my heart, right? And this is something that we as teachers also need to be reflecting on. What are we doing to ensure that we safeguard and protect the hearts of our learners, while also ensuring that we don't let the injustices of the world cause our hearts to harden, which results in us manifesting violence in different ways?
Okay, question?
Classrooms are not usually the safest place for teachers and learners to be, but that's not a very good question, allow me to say. What we should really question more is the education system itself, and say, what is the education system doing? Education is supposed to prepare learners to be active participants of the society. Now my question is, we have 26,000 schools. Out of the 26,000 schools, we have 1,098 private schools and 24,908 government schools, and we have 26 universities. So tell me here, if education is to prepare learners to be active participants of the society, how come we have 26 universities and 26,000 schools? Is that even possible? Does education prepare learners to be active participants of the society? It doesn't, from our own perspective. Now, I am saying, if learners are sitting in the classroom with one teacher, it's one teaching 50 learners, overcrowding of the classrooms, how do you expect the teacher to now speak about disciplining learners? Learners are bored simply because the knowledge is being deposited in them. There's no dialogue. How do I sit in the classroom and listen to someone, opening my head and feeling information, is then allowing me to dialogue with that person?
Right. Dr. Sarah, I like where you're going to, and I have a question specifically for you, Christian, and we're going to get to that. Dr. Sarah, you were shaking your head throughout everyone's answer. What were your thoughts? What was going through your head?
I mean, I think, as it specifically touched on a lot of things that I think are important. I'm thinking about, I interact with students in this institution, so thinking about how my students are safe in my class, how our students are safe in our classes. And I think that while we may be, although there are instances of physical violence, if we're speaking about militarization on campus, if we're speaking about privacy and security on campus. What I also was thinking about was how we prepare our teachers to go into a kind of world where people are not safe, where they're going to be dealing with young students, with young people who are dealing with such a broken society and world, and where we're interfacing with these students who are in their own lives in this kind of broken society and world. So what we have in a collective in our classroom is people who are dealing with such unmanageable living circumstances, and then we are maybe not as aware as we should be of assignment deadlines and how much work we're putting on and how much we're expecting from people, and of epistemic access and of where the knowledge is coming from. So I think that when we're talking about violence, as I mentioned, a lot of different kinds of violence that we need to take into account, but I think we need to, in terms of safety, mental health is a really important thing that we need to think about and that we need to do more work around on campus.
Thank you. Professor Mabona.
Thank you so much. I think unfortunately there is no amount of legislation, there's no amount of policy that can regulate a person. Education system and schools are a microcosm of the society that we're living in. And I think until we ask the question, why are we so angry? That we can start to think at a solution that starts to work systematically, right? So the oppression that we spoke about earlier, that happens in a systematic way that we can describe, and even that is implicit in the mind or on the self, they all work together. And in all spaces where communities gather, be it churches, we see it even in other places other than education of society. So for me, the issue is, I think perhaps it's time we start to move more into what is it that we can do. I would like to start to hear more of the liberation kind of the talk, because we can spend the whole day describing how the oppression has been and how much of its effects have been. We're living in it. We grow in it, we sleep in it, and it goes with us in every community of society that we are. I would like to start to talk about, is there anything we need to do? We accept, we acknowledge that we are a society that has been wronged, has been oppressed, and we are teachers who've been oppressed, and we're teaching children who have been oppressed, families that have been oppressed. Isn't it time for us to think about who are we and what is it that we can do? Are we perpetuating the system further by mere repetition information and going into history for purposes of acknowledging that we know already? When is it that we stand and we say, let's look at what transformation we need? What shape should this thing be? At what point do we take ownership and say, we are people and we know who we are? When are we starting to have these discussions and start to define what is it that we want? Who are we? You know, I suppose you're going to get to that point, and I feel the more we hear of what is wrong, it's so easy for the mind to be comfortable into that space where all the wrongs are coming everywhere else, I suppose.
Thank you. Philip, you had a response first.
Yeah, you know, I have issues with intellectual propositions as far as solving problems. Because I think the reason why I said regulate, if you regulate on the left, you must regulate on the right, is because at the moment, the current status of whatever is happening in schools is that there is a consequence when a teacher is violent towards a learner. But when a learner is violent towards a teacher, there is none whatsoever. And the reason why I'm saying there is none whatsoever, I know the processes I've practiced as a teacher before. Okay, well, I'm saying before as if it's a long time ago, but most recently. So you find learners who are expelled for being violent or for a misconduct at school. And when they come back, they are your responsibility as far as catching up on their work. So you still find yourself subjected to a further oppression when you try to discipline. When you try to follow the process of saying that I'll suspend the child so that they can go away, and when they come back, perhaps they're going to be better. Now I want to say this, as teachers we are part of our exploitation. Because the reason why I'm saying I hate intellectual conversations is because when you talk about intellectuals, you always try to find a big idea of things. You know, we can't really ask why are we angry, because that has been a societal problem for far too long. But now, what are the measures that are in place that will make sure that each and every one of us is held accountable for our actions? Because if we want to go and say, let's fix the society first and perhaps things are going to get better at the school, are we going to wait and say, when the society is good, then we can enjoy working? The reason why I'm saying teachers are conspirators to their exploitation is because you are the ones who are allowed to, or who actually agree to work in those working conditions that are not satisfying. They are the ones who persevere and say, I can go to this school because I feel like I can contribute. I'm not saying it's wrong, but I'm saying by allowing ourselves to be in a position where the government can withdraw itself as far as improving the working conditions, when we offer ourselves under the name of nobility to say that we are noble people, we're going to do this regardless of whether I don't have resources, regardless of whether the school is violent or not. That's the tool that they're using as a government to exploit us. So I'm saying teachers need to stand and defy to say that I cannot work under these conditions, because at the end of the day I'm going to be held accountable. When SACE comes, it doesn't care that whatever the number you had in class was 90 learners in your class. If there was a violent act that you conducted towards a learner out of frustrations, they don't care. So I'm saying there must be a balance. If there's regulation on the left, there must be a regulation on the right.
Thank you so much. With that being said, and I mean, myself as a pre-service teacher, graduating at the end of the year, early next year, going into the teaching profession. Patient, we have you on this panel for exactly this reason. I'm posing this question to you. As a pre-service educator, what are your concerns, or do you have any fears about entering the teaching profession next year? And you've touched on curriculum and the decolonization and the transformation of curriculum. what other concerns would you, as a pre-service teacher, have?
There's so many, but I'll just touch a few. Firstly, as a teacher myself, I'm oppressed. I'm oppressed by the curriculum that tells me how many minutes I should spend teaching a certain concept. I'm oppressed by people who come from the Department of Education and walk in my classroom anytime and ask for my lesson plans. I'm concerned about marking paper 1, paper 2, paper 3 of English and also paper 1, paper 2 of geography when I'm teaching 6 classes which have got like 50 learners in a classroom. I'm concerned about getting 20,000 as a teacher. I'm concerned about my profession being, I don't know how to put it, my profession as a teacher is just conceptualized as a normal person, and yet I'm the creator and the maker of my profession. I'm concerned about what is it that is put in place to protect me. I'm concerned about why am I being the one to be expelled if something happens in class, but my learners are only being suspended. I'm concerned about if anything can happen in a classroom and I respond, no one is going to stand and say, no, Mr. Malashela, this is the person that we're going to deal with and this is what we're going to do. I'm concerned about being held accountable than my own learners. But not only that, I am concerned about the education system that is training me. I am concerned about the education system that I'm going to use to teach other learners. It doesn't give me an opportunity for critical thinking. It doesn't allow me to question learners so that they can think out of the box. It's a repetition, it's a reproduction of the knowledge. I'm going to teach a geography. If I can go back to grade 10 now, I'm in my final year, right? But if I can go back to grade 10, I'm going to do the same thing that I did in that year when I was in grade 10. I'm concerned about not being able to express myself about the knowledge. I'm questioning myself to say, but according to who? Why is this knowledge more valued? Why can't you allow me to question? Why can't you allow me to critique? Why do I have to, let me talk about private and government schools, for instance. In a government school, you have 30% as a pass rate. You also have our own government. That is saying a learner cannot repeat a class twice. The own government that converts a learner from grade 11 to grade 12 or from grade 10 to grade 11 and expect me to perform a miracle on that learner.
Okay, question. I'm glad that you've raised valid concerns, and I want to draw in Ms. Mukhalane from SACE, and I want to draw Professor Mabunga from you're basically part of the curriculum that is being taught to us as teachers, and we need to use that curriculum to teach other learners. How would you respond to Christian's concern? Because he feels like this knowledge that we're learning has no substance, and we're just learning it because that's what we need to do. Do we ever reach a point where we need to question our own knowledge and see if it's enough for us to actually go there and be social agents in the classroom? So I'll start with Professor Mabunga and responding to question, and then I'll have Ms. Mukhalane to respond on the teacher and how the teacher is always seen as the villain in the story. Right.
I think those are genuine concerns. Those are concerns that when we see the South African system, the disparities between the different systems, the private and the government, those are the things that you see, right? And in the same vein, we have those concerns, by the way, as educators. We are not excluded into this. Let me speak for myself. We share the same concerns. We are about to release about more than 2,000, 3,000 students who are going to go to TE. It's, in the next 6 weeks to be exposed. And some of them, we have to rescue them because of the violence out there and the things that are happening out there. And really, it is within a society that is deeply at pain. In South Africa today, I know you mentioned that we have to wait until we fix the society before we fix the education. Unfortunately, education is not an island, it is within the broader society. And I think some of these issues are perhaps not issues that needs to be seen in isolation, in a linear form. The issues that we need to look at them in parallel in multiple ways, including developing a society where we have shared desires, we have shared values, and that helps us not to depend on policies to do certain things, to have that inner and shared value. I think this is what I'm trying to get to. We, just like we are here, we all share the understanding it's good to be in a safe space, and it's good for me to speak what I'm feeling without fear, for example, right? So this is the shared value that we share in this space. So I think it is a complex issue, the issue of education. So these are concerns. For example, in our education, in our programs, and I'm speaking for this particular university and I can't speak for others. In our university, for example, it's very rare that you will find a methodology teacher teaching you the curriculum. Teaching you, I think, what is it called? CAPS. That we are teaching you CAPS. This is how CAPS is. We're looking at frameworks, we are looking at the big ideas. We are looking at those things that when you understand, you are able to change, you are able to have this freedom in your classroom, to consider certain things. Yes, it is restrictive in a sense that it does tell you what and when to do, and those are the pacemakers, if I understand correctly, in the system. And Mem will speak to them at this point. But we share the same fears. And our view is that we would like to develop, or at least to have an engagement of developing a shared understanding of what a teacher should be in a society that is changing. And we're hoping for change. I'm hoping that with the new election coming, really we can start speaking of terms and values that we feel comfortable with, that are open spaces where we can say this is what we like, this we think we have a capability to be. So through our education, through our the way and the talk, Sarah mentioned earlier, or Dr. Gotsal mentioned that in my classroom, I think the space is safe. We are engaging on all these issues, and that's the beauty perhaps of being in education. We're using frameworks that are looking into the curriculum from the perspective of learner, from the perspective of all these other aspects, and developing that, than teaching you this is the sequence of the CAPS document, because that will change tomorrow to be something else. So education has a big idea, fundamental principles and values that it needs to develop, I think. The issue is, for me, to get to that point, we have shared understanding of this. And we've created enough spaces for ourselves to engage with these things and come to some common understanding about it.
Thank you, Professor. Ms. Mohammed.
I think let me start with the issue of oppression amongst educators themselves. You have a big struggle within the teaching profession between...
I'm sorry, Ms. Mohammed, are you going to reduce that to 2 minutes?
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Between your newly qualified and your experienced educators. For some reasons, they just shifting them away to say, we don't know anything. I think those are some of the things that I agree with you that we need to start dealing with if we are to address some of the challenges that we are facing. I mean, we are called by names, you are footers, you are whatever, and therefore when you come into the schools, you are seen as, no, you don't hear. So I'm thinking if we are really to deal with the challenges that we are facing, we need to also start there. But also from a SACE point of view, one of the things that we are doing is to begin professionalizing the teaching profession. And in doing that, we are saying we can't look into the practicing teachers only. We need to start looking at the entire teacher education continuum to say if we are to understand the bigger picture, let's start by looking at what does it mean to have this kind of a teacher in this country. What kind of a teacher do we want to see higher education institutions producing, but also working into the South African schools. So I can go on and on, but because you're limited.
Thank you so much. I'd like to jump to the audience. This is your chance to ask your questions. I'm going to take a round of hands. Can I just collect 2 mics from the stage? And then what we'll do is we'll take hands. Can you please brief your questions to at least 30 seconds, and then we'll give the panelists an opportunity to reply. Panelists, you have 1 minute to answer every question, so please try to be as concise as possible. I've noted here in front, at the back, 2, 3, 4, and then 5 at the back. So in that order, I'll notate the second round, sir. All right, we can start at the top.
Thank you very much. So I'll try and I don't know, I think I'm having a problem with the idea that we can't put it in policy for oppression in the workplace or even in education to change, because there's so many, see when you ask questions like, why are people so angry and what is happening in the classroom, why are people so violent and such and such. People go back to history because they want to bring up solutions, right? So when people bring up things like economic oppression, the fact that most people, and mostly kids in public schools, are the ones who are suffering from these policies, they come up with solutions like, don't make the pass rates 13%. So they say, okay, take it higher. And if you want to take it higher, make sure that you don't put it in policy to say that a kid mustn't repeat a class, because it becomes a problem to have a kid who can't read in matric. It becomes a problem that we don't address, that most of these kids in townships have psychological issues. And how is it a thing that in private schools they can get psychologists, but in public schools it's not in policy to say that each and every public school must be able to address the issue. But hey, these kids that live in these townships probably face a lot of violence and things like that. So why don't we give them psychologists who can maybe find out why this child can't read at 16, instead of making it a teacher's responsibility all the time. So I'm just trying to highlight that a lot of the dialogue that's happening here it's putting so much pressure on teachers to become extraordinary outside of a system that has rules in place to constantly reproduce the same kind of education system that it's been reproducing for years.
Thank you, ma'am. I'd like to come down here in the front.
My question is for school representatives. Do you guys feel like you're doing enough to not oppress us as students? And are you doing enough to liberate us? Because you're sort of an important piece in the system. If we don't get out liberated and we're going to a broken system, we won't perform effectively. So I want any one of you to respond to that.
Okay, thank you. Next over there. Who was the third person who raised their hand? Oh, it was there. Okay, I'll come back to you now. Here in front.
Thank you, Chair. In the 2018 Funde Education Forum, highly esteemed Professor Tuli Madonsela once said, we fought for our freedom, but we got democracy. We don't want democracy. I'd like to pose my question to the transformation officer of the Vet School of Education. From where you are seated, would you say that our education that we have currently promotes issues of democracy or issues of freedom? Coming to Professor Mavunga, I would like to believe that our curriculum is outdated, irrelevant, and unresponsive to the African needs. With that being said, as a vet school of education, a teacher training institution, what knowledge should be included in training, in effectively training teachers who will train our learners to be active citizens in our country? Coming to you, Dr. Philip. You are running an organization for teachers. Just a second.
Right.
Thanks, Chair. Just a second. You are running an organization that talks to teacher issues. What are you doing in relation to teachers, and what is your plan going forward? Thank you.
Thank you. At the back.
Thank you very much for the opportunity. We start to respond to the question, why are we angry? We are very angry because of our marginalized, we are excluded from the education as black students, right? Those are the issues that we must always put in mind whenever we are speaking about oppression and liberation education. So as a philosopher, somehow I actually surprises me to see a whole professor to speak like this. In terms of violence, violence is not only physical, and violence is not only emotional, right? There's also psychological violence. For instance, the dehumanization of teachers and the dehumanization of students. Students having to attend classes without eating, but they have to compare with students who are from well homes. Now, also excluding the issue of race in this conversation. How are you expecting the same black students in the minority to be equal? The education is not equal, as we all can see. And we also need to understand where the education emanates from. Now we speak of education. The first school in South Africa was the Lifestyle School, right? What was the main objective of that school? What was the main objective of schooling in South Africa? From missionary education to where we are, we can have revised curriculum, we can have whatever curriculum, but the main objective of that curriculum is to teach us to be the working slaves of the system, right? Who are not being taught to be active participants, to be people that are going to be autonomous on their own decisions that they make through their lives. This education does not assist us with anything, but to only propel us to be the slaves of the so-called masters in a neoliberal context.
Okay.
And when you speak about such things, sorry my brother.
Okay.
And
Please
when you
just
speak
wrap up.
about such things, we don't have to be afraid. We need to state and raise these issues the way we are. So when we go to legislation, when we go to policies, we know which policies, which legislation do we want to implement, and which policies do we want to change. We're not going to change policies as if we're blind. We need to know what is happening with those policies and where are we, what are they doing on our daily lives. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Easy, yes. I think that my brother, you raised a very important point by saying that we should not be scared in articulating our views, but also in articulating our views, we should try to put them in the most respectful manner as we possibly can. And I think that the President Fakhruddin did mention that the etiquette of the discussion is to say that, number one, possibly all of us are going to leave you with different views. And we hear, I mean, there's 50 people there could be possibly 50 people in this room, but there are more than 120 different views. But we need to understand that we need to be willing to listen to the next person, and we need to be willing to open to a discourse and have an intellectual discussion. Thanks.
Thank you, Musa. There was a question there, but can I just get responses from the panelists, and then we'll take your question in the next round. Thank you. I'd like to start with Philip, because I think you have the most questions to answer. 1 minute.
I only have one question.
You only have one question. Oh, there was one person who asked 3 questions.
Yeah.
Okay. Yes, 1 minute. Let's go.
Yeah. So in terms of, I want to answer my question using what the sales representative has said. In terms of the disharmony that exists between newly qualified teachers and I'll call them veteran teachers. So I personally think the fact that, you know, when it comes to newly qualified teachers, they come with an idea of transforming the sector. And now when you find a very rigid sector that says, we have done that, we have tried that, and it didn't succeed, and therefore the frustration comes, and then there's disharmony between them. There are other factors, but I think that's the prime. So in terms of us as a society, as RTI Foundation, We have realized the gap that is created by this disharmony. And we want to bridge that gap. And in bridging the gap, because our fundamental idea is to transform the image of the teaching profession. Because we are where we are right now because of the perception that is held about the profession. We are held as people who are inactive, inferior in terms of knowledge, while it is not the case. You can hear people who are expressing views here that they are well-founded in terms of the knowledge capital. So we're trying to bridge that gap. And one of the things that we're doing this year, which is to focus our vision of transforming the teaching profession, is what we have called or termed the Radical Teachers Manifesto. And it is a manifesto that has 10 points. I don't know if I can go through the 10 points as a conclusion to answering the question. Yes, thank you. Thank you, Chair. So the first, exactly. So the first one is we call for a transformation of teaching politically, because it's a political, profession. And the advancement of newly qualified teachers' interest in the profession. Because for a long time, the interest of newly qualifying teachers has been ignored. You go to any meeting of development, of whether a union meeting, they speak to their members, and the members are the veteran teachers. They don't speak anything that is pertaining to the newly qualified in terms of developing them, in terms of improving their working conditions, in terms of as newly qualified teachers individually. We call for human working conditions, and this is not new. This has been a struggle for teachers for a long time. And we call for an anti-de-skilling of teachers by the government through certain things that are implemented when it comes to policies. The sixth one is the restoration of the profession and public trust, which is very important because it changes the perception of what the teachers are in the society. The anti-bureaucratic, unsustainable interference which emanates from a culture of suspicion. Because I think everything that is implemented in the profession, as far as regulating the teachers' work, it comes from a culture of suspicion that teachers are not doing their work. Teachers are doing something that has to do with misconduct. The other one is the protection of teachers from the victimization by parents, learners, and bureaucrats. The eighth one is justifiable accountability procedures. We need to know where is it in policy that says I must do this, and hold me accountable based on what the policy is saying. The ninth one is teachers' development that serves both capacity and political purposes, because as far as we are concerned right now, whatever is happening as far as teacher development is that you are fed what you know already. So you go to a teacher development, they train you on a subject that you're teaching, and you're sitting there wasting 2 hours of your time learning nothing. Instead of integrating the issues of labor issues, the policies that govern the work of teachers, so that teachers can be conscientized that this is what governs their work and be able to actively participate in the profession. And the last one is a public and a transparent engagement led by teachers like this one.
Thank you. Please take the mic away from that. All right, Professor Mabunga, I think you can answer your question now.
All right. I think I want to clarify my reference to policy, what I mean, right? I really believe that policy is something that we have an agency to influence what it says and what it does. But the starting point is not depending on policy in order to move forward. And my reference to history, and I really mean this, that we go back to see all the ills, and we understand all the ills that are well documented. But I believe that we're becoming comfortable in staying there and not moving forward in terms of engaging and opening a space where it's safe for us to discuss what vision do we have for the future. What would the policy for the future look like, right? I really believe of policy as a living document, as a document that reflects the wishes and the thinking and the vision of the people at the time. So that's my personal view about policy. I really believe at any point I could have agency to influence influence policy, right? So be it that policy may not fit a particular situation at this time or in the past, I have the agency to influence it. And that's my message. Right. So that's the one.
Thank you so much. I think let's move on because we're really running out of time. Ms. Mukhanana, did you have a question directed to you?
Not necessarily, but just
It was directed to any school representative. So I think, okay, Dr. Sarah, I think you can answer the question that was posed to you.
Okay, I had two, but I want to answer them together. First of all, a point of clarification. I'm not the transformation officer on this campus. We're part of a transformation committee that is just reconstituted from a working group. That there are no hierarchical positions at this point in time, and we're still working on our agenda. But the question about are we doing enough as a school to produce learners, to produce teachers that are engaged in and equipped to teach in South Africa that you're going into? And does our education, I mean, I can't speak to the question if our education system promotes democracy and freedom. I think that we need to do some work in untangling those concepts, which I think was what Studimanonsela was saying, and I think needs to be done historically as well as in our present day. Are we doing enough? I think no, but I think we're trying every day our absolute hardest to produce critical thinkers. I believe in education as something that can transform, and I believe that everybody who works in School of Education believes in education as something that can transform. And I don't think that we can teach things around democracy and freedom. I learn things around democracy and freedom from my students. I'm pushed every day by my students, and my aim in my history classes is not to teach information about what's about the ills that have brought us here, but to teach critical thinking about the narratives that we have, so we have different ways of understanding why we are where we are now. So we can be brave about facing our history, so we can be brave about transforming the country and the future, and I believe education has a part in that.
Thank you so much. We're really pressed for time, so I want to just take two hands, one there and one here, the one with the black jacket. I'm really, really pressed for time, so I can only take these two hands, guys. I'm really sorry. Let's start at the back.
Thank you very much, and thank you very much for this platform that we have as student teachers. And what I want to ask is that I normally tell people that you are a member of a community first before you're a student. And in the conversation of a teacher and a learner, we always exclude the issue of the community. Because I might be a learner and I come from a family of family members that through some sort of socialization, that's where I get my education as to how to interact with people. And as a teacher, I may be brother to someone that back at home teach them something how to interact with people. Because if we're going to look at teacher and then a problem from an education institution only, it becomes a problem. And we forget that we're members of the community, how we behave to one another, how we treat one another, start from home. That's where we need to address the issue of this violence in school. We have to look at our homes, our family. Gone are those days where, back in the time of apartheid, where because of gender issues, where you find that the teachers were black females, where they used to be in a mission of students fulfilling their intellectual destiny, where you find that when they look at a learner, they look at an issue of that, we must know where these learners stay, where they worship, the homes they stay in, how are they treated like, so that they build this learner that will become the learners in the schools that we're looking for. Now my question goes to is, the question that we must look at is what is education to a South African community, and what must be the education to that South African community for us to have a conversation as to oppression, liberation and education in the context of where we have been and where we're going as a country. That's my questions that I want us to look at.
Thank you. And then the last hand over here.
Sure. Thank you very much. But chairperson of the session, I'd like to create that safe space that has been taught about or has been spoken about, right? We are going to talk about the real issues of this country. And I think these hands that are going up now want to come and confront that thing. So saying we are short of time is going to collapse us, and then we have to wait for another sitting like this to come in and talk about such pressing issues, right? So what my question is, it's a series of questions, but you already made me intimidated by the time issue. Can you allow that we at least extend to other questions so that we learn as student teachers also and future teachers? So we are in a systematic education system. Right? I think my two brothers, they explained it very nicely. And everyone who's been speaking in the panel is explaining it. That this systematic education, he even knows the number of schools and the proximity and what's going on in detail. It shows you that it's a hierarchy that drops people as it goes. Right? Even in the school of education, we see that hierarchy, how it drops people. It's very, very difficult as a teacher in training to be at FITS. You can't afford to be at FITS as a teacher in training. Before you even go to a profession where they're going to give you 20,000, and that's actually 17,000 before tax, right? So you are underappreciated as a person who goes to TE for 6 weeks, goes there and works, and maybe if the teacher that you are with is kind, they'll give you a chocolate nyana to say thank you at the end of your 6 weeks, right? Why is the School of Education overcharging us to go and do our practicals as teachers? Why is the Department of Basic Education turning a blind eye and not wanting to give us stipends for us going to the teaching profession? It might be seen as a small thing or as you know, as a by the way issue, but it builds on what type of teacher you want to see in the classroom, in the motivation. That 1.5, I know it's been a rhetoric, right? That 1.5, you have to travel, you have to wear, you have to eat, you have to have all those things. It's not enough. Your presentation, the first thing that you get into class, learners will already assume your lifestyle.
Okay, I'm sorry to interrupt. Can you please just wrap up your...
Okay, it's fine, right? So, it goes to the decolonizing of the curriculum. Actually, this is not a question. Like, I'm trying to, as little as I can, give information to those panelists sitting there of the way of thinking of education students or students in waiting to be teachers.
Okay, can I give you 10 seconds on that?
Sure, thank you. Let me wrap up.
Thank you.
You teach me about little Albert, who needs space to grow, who needs all these objects to be inquisitive and grow and so forth. When I go to my teaching experience in Alex, the conditions of little Albert do not apply there. There's no space to grow. There's a society that is different from what is in learned in the textbook. So the education that we are getting needs to be decolonized. The structure of education should not make us the people who are going to perpetuate the misconduct of the past, just in different form. It should make us teachers that grow a future that we are going to be proud of.
Okay, can I really just stop you there?
Sitting down.
All right.
The School of Education is not ready for the fourth industrial revolution.
Okay. Okay, I'm really going to stop you there. I can't, to address your issue on really getting a sense of people's opinions, we're really pressed for time, and I don't want to keep any of the panelists here. People are coming from work, people have families to attend to, so I really want to wrap up this discussion. I think what we can do as the Radical Teachers Institute, and I'm going to speak to my committee about this, is that we urgently have another dialogue, especially with students, because we can see that the issue is within here, and the solutions are in here. So I'm speaking on behalf of my committee. We're going to look into having another discussion very quick, very soon, to address everyone's concerns. Okay. Okay, let's answer the one question. Can I just have one person to answer it? Yes. One person, 1 minute, and then we will wrap up.
Just with regards to the issue of community education, I'm really glad that you brought that up, Brad. In preparation for the discussion, I was looking through a book on Fees Must Fall. There was a book written on Fees Must Fall. And there was an interesting point made about how leading up to a lot of the social movements that have shaped our communities and shaped our world, you had processes of education that were instrumental in that. And those processes of education applied not just to students in schools, but to the broader communities from which those students came. So there was a teacher by the name of Onkobota Tiro, who was based in Soweto, and he used his education, his teaching in a primary school as a way of educating his students leading up to the 76 Soweto uprising. But I think this is an interesting point that can be raised about why is it that we limit our understanding of what schooling and education means to what happens in secondary schools or tertiary institutions? What can we as teachers who have the knowledge and have the skills to engage on issues that are affecting communities, what can we do to now think about opportunities for community education? So reimagining the idea that learning isn't a locative thing, right? Learning can take place in any context, in any situation. So that's the challenge that we can put forward to the people that are here, is to rethink what can we do to educate our communities. And also to address the fact that, our students are coming from situations where we have been socialized to believe certain things. And so there's a lot of things that we need to unlearn about gender, about race, about identity. And that might be a starting point. So yeah, that's mine.
Thank you so much. I know I'm not supposed to have any say in this, but I'd like to close on this note. And it's a quote by Paulo Freire. I mean, Asif was one who drove this into us as like, read Pedagogy of the Oppressed. And I've come across this profound quote. It says, the oppressed must be their own example in the struggle for their redemption. And like Asif said now, we as the oppressed really have the answer. And we really just need to discuss and have dialogues and interact with other people who are oppressed. And we can bring ourselves out of this liberation. And I'll close on that note. Thank you so much to all the panelists for coming and for sharing your thoughts and opinions with us. We really appreciate it. Professor Mabunga, thank you for coming in at the last minute. Your opinions were really valid and appreciated. To all the people who attended here, thank you so much. The RTI is not done yet. We just started and we hope to really just engage with all of you guys in the future. Right. We're also going to be still taking subscriptions to the RTI Student Society. More information will be either on our Facebook page or on our Twitter account, so stay tuned for that. And on that note, everyone travel safely and thank you.
The governor